Yes, no matter how old I get, I still love that intro. And when it comes to the Sony PlayStation, it holds such good memories, especially with some of its amazing games.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
The success of the PlayStation would lead to many upgrades, and obviously the PlayStation 2 is a fan favourite. But how many of you out there have your hands on the elusive PlayStation 5?
Great white buffalo.
Yeah, I thought so. Quite a small number of you have a PlayStation 5, not surprising because it's quite elusive. But anyway, eventually I'll look at the other consoles from Sony, but for now, let's take a trip back to the past to appreciate the Sony PlayStation. All the way back in the late 80s, Nintendo and Sony had already established a partnership over the years. And it was the introduction of the Super Nintendo that saw this collaboration enter a new era of possibilities. Now Sony were in talks to partner with Nintendo once again to produce a CD-based add-on for the Super Nintendo. However, shortly after this announcement, Nintendo changed their minds and decided to pair with Philips, creating the Philips CDI, essentially undoing all their work with Sony.
No! God, please, no!
This was dubbed as the greatest betrayal in the world of gaming, and most of you are aware of exactly how bad the Philips CDI performed.
Oh crap.
But this didn't deter Sony from creating perhaps one of the most popular consoles of the late 90s, the Sony PlayStation.
Nice.
It was 1995, and the Sony PlayStation graced the illustrious realm of video games, taking the digital kingdom of fun by storm. Gamers and non-gamers alike were pulling out all the stops to get their hands on this newest console. Obviously, the PlayStation was very popular, and part of its success was down to its games, which made this classic console such a hit with players.
Oh, really?
Indeed it was. And of course, you can't talk about the PlayStation without mentioning a certain Bandicoot. When Crash Bandicoot landed on the PlayStation, other rival competitors took notice of Naughty Dog's amazing platformer, which saw players taking on the role of Crash on an adventure to stop the evil Dr. Cortex.
Just bring it, bitch!
Now there were other games that had cute protagonists, but the PlayStation wasn't just another console aimed at a younger audience. In fact, it had other titles that took on a more mature style. Some titles that spring to mind are obviously Silent Hill, Fear Effect, and of course, Tenchu Stealth Assassins. Oh, and of course you can't forget Miss Croft, who became the subject of fantasy for so many. In fact, I made a video on her earlier this year.
Oh my.
However, there is a certain game throughout many that went on to spawn a massive franchise. And of course, I'm talking about GTA. When GTA found a home in the PlayStation, it sent shockwaves throughout the gaming world, as well as finding itself being the subject of controversy, especially for its content.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
Players were given the choice of either playing by the rules or going on a rampage that even the most hardened criminals would frown upon.
No sir, I don't like it.
Despite the controversies, GTA was still massively popular with gamers, especially those that loved running down the pedestrians dressed in orange. It felt like the PlayStation was flying high in terms of popularity, but it wouldn't be long until an adversary from the past soon raised its head. Nintendo had returned with their newest console, which of course enticed some gamers to jump ship. And while some went on to enjoy the escapades of the Nintendo 64, many stayed loyal to the PlayStation and continued to be blessed with some classic games. Now the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation were going to become the biggest competitors in the world of gaming at the time, somewhat emulating the same rivalry between the Sega Mega Drive and the Super Nintendo.
That's pretty good.
But anyway, eventually a title would appear out of nowhere, and the name alone is legendary within the world of video games. And of course I'm talking about Metal Gear Solid. Oh, just the name itself sends a shiver down my spine. Playing as Solid Snake, gamers were taken on an espionage adventure where the gameplay was heavily story driven, and when given the choice of avoiding confrontation or going up against enemies all guns blazing, players would make the right choice. When Metal Gear Solid was released, it sent shockwaves through the world of gaming, and is one franchise I definitely will be returning to in the future. Perhaps for when I reach 1,000 subscribers, or even 10,000.
You're goddamn right.
Considering that the PlayStation was Sony's first console, they seem to be taking the realm of video games by storm. More and more titles would come and go, and while others would slowly fade into obscurity, the likes of Tekken 3, Dino Crisis, and even Soul Reaver would become true classics for the PlayStation. Those 3 games, as well as many others, went on to become part of gaming history. But it was in 1997 that a certain fantasy game made its new home on the PlayStation. The hype surrounding Final Fantasy VII could be felt all around the world, and players were anticipating this latest JRPG from Square. Its turn-based gameplay was favoured by gamers who were fans of the series, but it was the compelling story, filled with many twists and turns, that made Final Fantasy VII such a masterpiece for PlayStation owners. There are memorable moments within Final Fantasy VII that have stuck with gamers, especially one in particular, but I'm not going to spoil anything, but all I can say is get ready to be shocked.
Indeed.
As the PlayStation's popularity grew and grew, it would eventually take on a newer and sleeker design with the PS1 model. And of course, I'll be looking at the differences between this version and the original in future videos, as well as the many peripherals that became available for the Sony PlayStation. All in all, the Sony PlayStation has gone down in history as one of those video game consoles that revolutionised the world of gaming. And come to think of it, much of the success of the PlayStation was down to its endearing qualities, as well as some of its classic games. With the world of gaming still continuing to be blessed with consoles from Sony, I can only wonder what the future has in store for the PlayStation. Either way, for some, the amazing journey into the realm of video games all started with the original PlayStation. And my question for everyone watching is, which title is your favourite? Anyway, come back next time where the festive season begins, and I only feel it's right to look at some die-hard games. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next game.